Sometimes a single moment can change everything you thought you knew about your own home, and about the people living quietly inside it. Tonight, we follow a mother worn down by grief, 4 little girls who haven't laughed in years, and one ordinary man whose presence begins to stir something no one expected. Stay with this story, because what happens next will touch your heart in ways you don't see coming. Billionaire arrived home, unannounced, and saw the janitor with her quadruplets. What she saw shocked. The sound hit first, sharp, hurried, unmistakably stressed. Heels striking marble. Click, click, click. Each step carried the clipped tension of someone who'd spent the last 3 hours fighting off a boardroom full of men twice her age and half her empathy. Charlotte Hale didn't slow down. Not for the assistant still calling after her, not for the vibration of her phone lighting up with yet another crisis alert. She moved through the glass lobby of Hale Dynamics like a storm that refused to apologize for arriving uninvited. Charlotte, your 4 p.m. with Zurich wants confirmation. Her assistant tried again. Cancel it, Charlotte said, her tone polished steel. And tell investor relations to send the revised guidance tonight. No interviews, no comments. Yes, ma'am. A soft chime in her ear, another notification. Stock dipping. Analysts speculating. Shareholders demanding an emergency call. The chorus of pressure never stopped. But she kept walking anyway. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual chaos, horns, sirens, crosswalk bleeps, but those sounds dimmed the second her car door closed. The hush inside the vehicle felt unnatural, almost too gentle against the noise in her head. She whispered under her breath, barely audible even to herself, "Just take me home." As the driver pulled away, Charlotte exhaled through her nose the way her therapist once taught her, though she rarely followed the advice. Home wasn't exactly comforting. Home was quiet. Too quiet. 3 years of too quiet. Her phone buzzed again this time, a message from the head of PR. Paparazzi digging into your home staff again. Need guidance ASAP. She closed her eyes. Not now. Not tonight. For one reckless moment, Charlotte didn't respond. She simply removed her earpiece, letting the world fall blissfully silent. When the car rolled to a stop at the gate of the Hale estate, she hesitated. That wasn't like her. She was Charlotte Hale, woman who built a multi-billion-dollar tech empire in a decade, who stared down journalists without blinking, who negotiated contracts while 6 months pregnant with quadruplets. And yet she sat there, hands resting on her lap, fingers cold. She hadn't told anyone she was coming home early. Good. She didn't want anyone to prepare. She wanted to walk into her own house and not feel managed. The front door unlocked with its familiar electronic click, and Charlotte stepped inside. Immediately she was greeted by the sounds she knew too well. Silence. The quiet had texture, soft, hollow, almost echoing. Her heels brushed the wooden floorboards with a muted tap. A clock somewhere in the hallway ticked steadily, marking the minutes she tried so hard to outrun each day. This was the place where laughter died. Literally. After Daniel's helicopter went down, the house had folded into itself, its brightness dimmed, its warmth drained. The 4 little girls who once babbled and chirped fell into a collective hush Charlotte never learned how to penetrate. 3-year-olds shouldn't understand grief that deeply. But hers did. She placed her bag on the counter, listening the way a mother does, hoping for something, anything, the patter of small feet, the babble of toddler questions, even a whine. Nothing. Charlotte pressed a palm to her temple. Maybe I should have stayed at the office. At least their silence meant productivity. Here, silence meant failure. She took a step toward the hallway, then another. And then a sound shattered the stillness. Not just a sound, an eruption. A bright, bubbling burst of laughter so loud, so full, so unrestrained it startled her heart into skipping. Children's laughter. 4 voices. Her daughter's. Charlotte froze. Her first thought was panic. Something's wrong. They never laugh like that. Her second thought was fear. Who is with them? Why didn't security call her heels struck the floor faster now, echoing the tremor under her ribs? She rounded the corridor toward the grand room, pulse rising with every step. As she neared the doorway, the laughter grew clearer. Tiny gasps between giggles, the slap of small hands clapping, the delighted squeal of one child shouting something she couldn't make out. It didn't sound like her daughters, not the daughters she knew. And then she heard him. A deep, warm laugh, unexpected, unfiltered, rolling through the room with the ease of someone who didn't know this house was supposed to be a mausoleum of memories. Miles Carter, the janitor. Charlotte reached the doorway and stopped so abruptly her breath caught in her throat. There he was on his knees on the rug, a makeshift harness of play ropes looped around his waist, two giggling toddlers bouncing on his back like he was a gentle giant, while the other two tugged the rope and shrieked with delight. His voice rumbled with playful protest. "Hey now, team. Be gentle with the old guy. I only got one spine left." More laughter, louder this time. Full-bodied, unrestrained, alive. Miles grinned a real grin, not the polite nod he usually offered staff. And her daughters, Ellie, Emma, Everly, Ava, they were glowing with a joy Charlotte hadn't seen since Daniel kissed them goodnight for the last time. She felt something inside her crack open, a mixture of awe, jealousy, and a sharp, unexpected ache. They didn't even notice she was standing there. One little girl, Eva, smallest of the four, buried her face against Miles's shoulder, still laughing. And Miles, quiet, reserved. Miles held her with a tenderness that made Charlotte's throat tighten. Her daughters weren't afraid. They weren't withdrawn. They weren't silent. They were alive. With him. Charlotte's hand tightened around her handbag strap, knuckles whitening. Who is this man? And how did he unlock something in them that even I... She swallowed hard. That even I couldn't. The question rose before she could stop it, sharp and angry and terrified all at once. Who exactly is this man? And why do my daughters laugh like this with him? And that was when Miles finally turned and saw her. His smile faded. The rope slipped from his hand. 4 pairs of tiny eyes lifted toward the doorway. The room fell silent. The morning didn't sound like her mornings. Charlotte woke to something she hadn't heard in years, light footsteps scampering across hardwood floors, the squeak of a toy, tiny voices whispering, then bursting into soft giggles as if they were trying not to wake her. The air in the hallway carried the warm, restless energy of children who finally remembered how to be children. She sat up, slowly listening. They're talking. No, that wasn't the right word. They were chatting. They were weaving sounds together, little attempts at sentences, not just the clipped one-syllable answers she usually begged for. A pang spread through her chest, sharp enough to make her inhale. She should go out there. She should greet them, hug them, show them she noticed. But instead she stayed still as if afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over the house. Downstairs a soft tap of plastic blocks echoed. Then a tiny voice, Emma's, piped up, "We're Mr. Miles," followed by Ellie's faint reply, "Miles." Downstairs. Another giggle, a thump. Everly shushing someone. Eva humming a tune Charlotte didn't even know she knew. They're looking for him. The thought stung more than she expected. She slipped out of bed, the floor cool beneath her feet, and padded toward the stairs. She stopped halfway down when she saw them. All 4 girls sat in a small circle on the living room rug, waiting with the kind of anticipation they had never shown for her. Their hair was still mussed from sleep pajamas, wrinkled, but their eyes, usually dull and cautious, glimmered with excitement. When Miles entered the room, carrying a small basket of cleaning supplies, the girls lit up as if someone flipped a switch. There he is. You came, Miles, look my bear story. Their voices overlapped like a tiny choir Charlotte had been excluded from. Miles chuckled under his breath, the sound low and warm. Good morning, team. One at a time, otherwise the captain here gets confused. He tapped his own chest lightly as if confessing a flaw. They laughed again. laughed. Charlotte watched from the staircase unseen the way an outsider watches a family not their own. Later that morning, after she composed herself, she found the housekeeper in the kitchen and spoke quietly, though she wasn't sure why she bothered lowering her voice. "Maria, tell me about Miles." The housekeeper looked startled. "Miss Hale. Did something happen? I just want his file." Charlotte forced her tone to remain calm. "His background, employment history, everything." Maria hesitated only a second before nodding. "Of course." Charlotte took the thin folder, already annoyed by how little weight it had. A billionaire CEO expected pages education references corporate roles. But Miles Carter's entire life fit into 6 sheets of paper. High school diploma, odd jobs, custodial training certificate, no arrests, no red flags, nothing remarkable, just a man who kept his head down. Then, how does he— She swallowed. "How does he know my daughters better than I do?" She didn't mean the question to hurt, but it did. When she walked into the family room a few minutes later, she found the girls gathered around Miles again. He wasn't doing anything extraordinary, no special tricks, no toys, no theatrics. He was simply present. Everly tugged his sleeve. "Miles, you know my bunny name." He nodded instantly. "Snowdrop, because she has the floppy ear on the left side." Eva chimed in. "What about mine?" He didn't even pause. "Yours is Sunny, because you hug it when you're scared of storms." Charlotte felt her jaw loosen in disbelief. Ellie held up her small palm solemnly. "I know like loud noise." "I know," Miles said gently. "That's why we made the quiet signal. Remember?" He pressed his palm to hers. She smiled. Emma climbed into his lap without asking permission. "They've never climbed into mine like that." Charlotte exhaled slowly, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. Gratitude and shame tangled in her chest. She was grateful her daughters were finally blooming, but ashamed that a man paid to mop floors understood them more intimately than she did. That evening after dinner, Charlotte tried something she hadn't done in a long time. She sat on the rug beside the girls, attempting to join their world. "Mommy, build tower." Ava asked politely, though her tone held none of the sparkle she used with Miles. "Yes, sweetheart," Charlotte whispered, picking up a block. She reached to steady the tower, but Ellie gently pushed her hand away. "No, Mommy." "Miles do it better." Charlotte smiled, but inside, everything crumpled. She glanced toward Miles, who was wiping down the counter. His shoulders stiffened, he'd heard. Of course he'd heard. He always listened more than he spoke. Trying again, Charlotte asked softly, "Who wants to read a book with Mommy?" But the girls had already begun chanting, "Mr. Miles, Mr. Miles." He approached reluctantly. "Girls," your mom asked first. The room quieted. Charlotte waited, daring to hope. But little Everly whispered, "Mommy sad," and Emma answered with the blunt honesty of a toddler, "Mommy no read like Miles." It wasn't meant to wound, but it landed deep. Charlotte cleared her throat. "It's okay. Miles can read tonight." He looked at her carefully, too carefully, as if trying to assess whether he'd break something fragile by agreeing. Hours later, long after she thought everyone was asleep, the house stirred again. Charlotte stepped into the hallway, drawn by the faintest noise, the creak of a floorboard from the lower level. The grand staircase carried sound easily, and she followed it down, bare feet, silent. A soft glow spilled from the maintenance room. She approached slowly, unsure whether to knock or retreat. Inside, she heard a man's voice. Miles's voice. Quiet, tender, grieving. "Good night, Lily. Daddy's here." The words froze her. Lily. No one in this house had that name. She shifted slightly, just enough to see him through the crack in the door. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't on a video call. He was sitting alone on a small wooden stool, holding a tiny children's clock, pink and worn around the edges. He pressed it to his forehead like a prayer. Charlotte held her breath, not daring to interrupt her heart thudding with a strange mixture of fear and sympathy. "Who are you, Miles? What have you survived?" She stepped back, not wanting him to know she'd overheard, but the question, heavy and haunting, followed her up the stairs like a shadow. Why was a man with no daughter in this house saying goodnight to someone named Lily Rain, tapped against the roof in soft, uneven rhythms, tiny whispers that filled the darkened halls like a lullaby meant for a house that had forgotten how to sleep? Charlotte paused at the foot of the stairs, listening. Something about the sound felt heavier tonight, as if the weather itself understood that grief lived here too. Down the corridor, a light flickered beneath the maintenance room door. She hadn't planned to come back. She'd already heard more than she should, Miles's low, cracking whisper, "Good night, Lily. Daddy's here." But curiosity and something sharper fear pulled her closer again. Inside, another sound stirred. A faint chime. A small clock ringing a childish melody that didn't belong in this house. Charlotte exhaled slowly and knocked. The light inside shifted, followed by a startled breath. Yes. She opened the door just enough for her voice to carry. "Miles. It's Charlotte. May I?" He looked up from the stool, shoulders hunched as if he'd been struck mid-thought. In his hands rested the tiny pink clock she'd glimpsed before its edges worn its cartoon heart sticker half peeled. He immediately tried to tuck it away, but she noticed. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. "You didn't." His voice was too quick, too practiced. "I was just finishing up." Silence hovered between them, filled only by the pattering rain and the faint lingering ring of the little clock. Charlotte stepped inside and pulled the door closed behind her. "Miles. Who is Lily?" For a moment he didn't breathe. His hands tightened around the clock until it creaked. When he finally answered, the words came out low and raw. "She was my daughter." Charlotte's chest tightened. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't even known he had children. Miles stared at the floor as if reading memories written there. She passed away when she was 4. Heart condition. Very sudden. He rubbed his thumb over the clock's sticker. This was her bedtime clock. It rang at 7 every night. Story time. Charlotte swallowed. I'm so sorry." He nodded, but didn't acknowledge the sympathy. Men like him rarely knew how. Instead, he let out a breath that sounded like it had been caged for years. "I was supposed to be home early that night," he continued. "I told her I'd read her favorite story, but I picked up an extra shift. Just 2 hours. 2 hours I thought would help us catch up on bills." His voice cracked softly. "By the time I got home, the ambulance was already there." The rain outside thickened as if offering cover for the confession. "My wife blamed me. I blamed me. Marriage ended. I quit my trade. I didn't want to fix things anymore. I just wanted silence. So I took jobs where you disappear into the background." Charlotte's breath trembled. It was too familiar. The guilt. The what-ifs. The night that changed every law of gravity inside a home. She lowered herself onto the opposite stool. "Daniel, my husband. He died coming home early too," she murmured. "He always tried to catch bedtime, even if it meant rearranging flights, delaying meetings, cutting corners with his schedule." Miles lifted his gaze. "Helicopter crash, right?" "Yes." She nodded. He was rushing home. The girls had asked him to sing their lullaby. "I told him no, it was too much too late, but he went anyway." Her voice softened to a whisper. "Every time I hear the wind through the trees, I still think it's him, as if he might walk through the door." Their griefs, different shapes, same weight, filled the room like two shadows recognizing each other. Miles let his elbows rest on his knees. "I'm sorry, Charlotte." "I know." She stared at the tiny pink clock, imagining a little girl pressing its button with bright, trusting eyes. "Do you talk to her often?" "Every night," he admitted. "Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it's just habit." He managed a fragile half-smile. "Lily hated thunderstorms, so when it rains like this, I tell her she's safe." Charlotte's heart twisted. "My girls hate storms, too." He chuckled softly. "Kids always do." No, she corrected gently. I mean, they hate storms because storms mean change. They remember the night Daniel didn't come home. A quiet understanding settled between them, warm and sad and strangely comforting. Before either could speak again, the house shifted a soft patter of feet on the steps, followed by a timid whimper. Mr. Miles. A tiny voice. Everly. She stood in the doorway, clutching her blanket, eyes glistening with sleep and the remnants of a dream she couldn't shake. Charlotte rose quickly, but Everly moved first straight into Miles' arms. I had a bad dream, she whispered into his shirt. Miles stood frozen for a second, then gently lifted her onto his lap. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm right here. Charlotte watched her heart aching and softening at the same time. Everly usually recoiled from touch, even gentle touch, but here she was, clinging to him without hesitation. Emma appeared next, rubbing her eyes, then Ellie, then Eva dragging her stuffed bear. All four stood there drawn by the sound of Miles' voice like moths to a warm, steady flame. I think Miles said softly, "Someone needs the 7 o'clock song." He didn't sing, not exactly. He hummed low steady a tune so simple it felt like a heartbeat made audible. The girls leaned into it, heads on his shoulders, hands curled around his shirt. And for the first time in years, they reached for Charlotte too. Little fingers tugged her closer as if asking her to sit with them, to breathe with them, to exist inside this fragile healing moment. Charlotte knelt beside them, one hand resting lightly on Eva's back. She didn't cry. Not this time. The rain softened outside. Miles's humming slowed. Tiny breaths steadied. For one fleeting minute, sorrow didn't suffocate the room. It softened it. Later, when the girls were asleep again, Charlotte rose quietly and met Miles's gaze. His expression carried something unspoken, something wounded, yet determined. We're both still trying to come back to life, she thought. She stepped into the hallway, the shadows long but no longer threatening. As she ascended the stairs, a narrator's voice seemed to hover over the moment, invisible yet weighty. If their pain ran in parallel lines, what would happen when those lines finally met? For the first time in years, the Hale mansion did not wake in silence. Instead, the morning stirred with soft rhythms, little feet thumping across carpets, giggles bouncing off walls, the clatter of toys being rediscovered. Charlotte paused at the top of the stairs, holding the banister as if steadying herself. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was simply alive. Inside her chest, something unfamiliar fluttered, a tenderness she didn't quite trust yet. Downstairs, she heard Miles' voice, low and warm. He wasn't singing or playing. He was simply narrating the morning as though the house itself needed reassurance. Okay, team. Breakfast is up next. 1 blueberry pancake for Ellie, 2 for Eva, because she always steals one, and, hey, Everly, no climbing the chair before I pull it out. Tiny laughter followed. Charlotte took a breath and walked down. What followed over the next few days was not a miracle. Miracles felt too sudden, too convenient. No, this was something slower, quieter. Healing disguised as routine. Charlotte began coming home earlier. At first, for practical reasons, she told herself the girls needed consistency, structure, supervision. But deep down, she knew the truth. She didn't want to miss the sound of them laughing with Miles. Meals grew fuller, not just in noise, but in presence. At dinner, Everly dropped a spoon, and Miles pretended it was a meteor crash landing. The girls squealed. Charlotte found herself smiling despite a long, brutal day. "Mommy," Look Emma announced suddenly. "Miles make pancake dinosaur." "It's a stegosaurus," Miles corrected, gently sliding the plate toward her. She requested extra spikes. Charlotte leaned closer. "You really made that," he shrugged. "Food tastes better when it looks fun." The girls nodded vigorously, mouths already full of syrup and approval. Charlotte tried to join in more. She asked questions. She helped cut fruit. She even attempted to braid hair one morning, earning mixed but enthusiastic reactions. But still, every time she stepped into their space, she felt like she was interrupting a song mid-melody. One evening, after the girls finished building towers with wooden blocks, Charlotte walked into the kitchen to find Miles rinsing a pot while humming quietly. The tune was the same one he'd hummed during the storm, a lullaby without words. She lingered by the doorway. "You're good with them," she said softly. He didn't turn around. Kids are simple. They need attention consistency, and someone who doesn't lie to them about how they feel. Charlotte frowned. "You think I lie to them?" He shut off the faucet, turning slowly, drying his hands on a towel. "I think you're afraid they'll break if you touch the past." The words hit harder than she expected. "I'm trying." "I know." His voice softened. "They do too." A small silence, gentle not tense, filled the room. "You know," Miles added, "they talk more around you now. They try harder. They want you with them." "Do they?" Charlotte whispered. He gave a small nod. "Kids don't force themselves onto people they don't trust." Charlotte held that truth carefully, almost reverently. Then she exhaled a sound that carried months of exhaustion. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you get them to laugh again?" Miles rested his palms on the counter. By letting them lead. By not rushing a heart that wasn't ready. Charlotte's lips tightened, the shame of her own impatience creeping up her spine. "I've rushed everything in my life. That's because the world expected you to." His tone held no judgment, only recognition. They don't expect anything but love. Love. The word hung between them like something flammable. To shift the moment, Miles glanced toward the living room where toys were scattered everywhere. "I should finish cleaning before they." Charlotte stepped forward gently. "Stay for a minute." He hesitated, then nodded. Days melted into a rhythm that felt almost familial. Charlotte learned small things she'd never noticed. Eva hummed when she colored. Emma always counted her steps on the stairs. Ellie whispered to herself before speaking aloud. Everly watched everyone else before choosing her own reactions. And Miles, he knew these things instinctively. He didn't hover. He didn't command. He listened. One afternoon, when Charlotte returned home early, she found Miles teaching the girls how to tug ropes safely in a team challenge. He used sound cues, 2 taps for go, 1 tap for stop turning fear. Of loud noises into a game of control. The girls shrieked with delight. Charlotte knelt beside them, trying to join. She laughed when they laughed, tugged the rope gently with them, even let Everly climb into her lap. Each small moment cracked a little more of the ice around her heart. Later that night, after the girls fell asleep in a pile of stuffed animals, Charlotte waited in the kitchen as Miles put away dishes. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed. "Be a mother without breaking." He placed a dish towel on the counter. "You don't have to know. You just have to show up. Pain teaches us the wrong lessons sometimes. It makes us think love is fragile. But kids are forgiving. They're not keeping score." Charlotte stared at her hands. "Sometimes it feels like I'm the one who needs mothering." Miles smiled, small, sad understanding. "Grief does that." Their eyes held for a moment. Not romantic, not yet, but deeply human. The kitchen quieted. Only the distant hum of the dishwasher filled the space. Charlotte reached for a plate on the drying rack and it slipped. Careful Miles caught her hand before the plate hit the floor. His grip was steady, warm grounding. Their bodies stood close enough that she felt the breath he held. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. The unspoken past. The fragile present. The possibility of something more. Then a phone rang. Sharp, urgent, shattering the moment like glass. Charlotte stepped back quickly, pulse thudding in her throat. She grabbed the phone from the counter. "Hello." The voice on the other end was tight, cautious. Her late husband's attorney. "Charlotte, we need to discuss the images circulating online, and the man in your home." Her stomach dropped. "What images?" she whispered. you should check your email. This concerns custody and your reputation." Her breath caught. Behind her, Miles watched, unaware his world was about to collide with hers in a new, brutal way. The mansion felt colder the next morning, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Even the usual soft noises from the girls seemed muted, as if the house sensed something had shifted. Charlotte sat at the edge of her bed, her attorney's words replaying like a stubborn echo, urging her to open the email she'd avoided all night. When she finally did, the screen filled with images. Photos taken from a distance. Some from the garden. Some from the driveway. Some clearly shot through a fence or shrub line. But the headline beneath them hit harder than the invasion of privacy itself. Billionaire mom lets janitor play Daddy Chaos. Inside the Hale estate, Charlotte's breath thinned. There, in bright high definition, was Miles pushing the grocery cart with the girls hanging onto the sides. Miles kneeling to tie Ellie's shoe. Miles lifting Eva onto his shoulders while Everly and Emma reached up laughing. The photos were innocent. Wholesome, even. But the captions twisted them. Overstepping boundaries. Is this appropriate caregiving? Where is the mother? A soft knock on her bedroom door broke her trance. Ms. Hale, the housekeeper, whispered, "Your in-laws. They're here." Her chest tightened. Already. The dining room hummed with restrained judgment the moment she entered. Her late husband's sister Margaret was the first to speak, her voice wrapped in concern that barely hid disapproval. "We came as soon as we saw the articles." Charlotte. "This is troubling." Her father-in-law, stern as ever, folded his hands. "We know you've been under stress, but letting a janitor take on a parental role that invites questions." Charlotte stiffened. "He's been helping with the girls. They respond to him. That's precisely the problem," Margaret pressed. "Children that age imprint quickly. If this man has too much influence, he's not this man." Charlotte snapped before she could stop herself. "He's Miles, and he has been good to them." Margaret exchanged a loaded glance with her father. "We're not questioning his kindness. We're questioning the optics. This family is constantly in the public eye. You can't afford a scandal." Her father-in-law added quietly, "You also can't risk anything that jeopardizes custody stability. You know how fragile the legal agreements are after Daniel's passing." The implication hit its mark. "They're warning me. They think I'm being reckless." A simmering guilt rose inside Charlotte. She knew she had work obligations. She knew she'd leaned on Miles more than she realized. But using the girls' well-being as leverage, that was a step too far. Still, their words clung like burrs. Perhaps Margaret suggested smoothly a trained professional would be more appropriate. Someone with credentials, education, someone from our side of what Charlotte asked, even though she knew the answer. "Of society," Margaret whispered as if saying it aloud dirtied her tongue. Charlotte clenched her jaw. The urge to defend Miles burned in her throat, but before she could speak, her father-in-law sighed. "We're offering help, not criticism. We all want what's best for the girls. But do you?" Charlotte wondered. "Or do you want control?" Later that afternoon, a board meeting filled her phone with notifications. Comments about leadership stability, questionable personal environment. The articles had spread fast. When she logged into the emergency call, a senior board member didn't bother with polite phrasing. "We're concerned, Charlotte. Investors are cautious about anything that paints the company as unstable. This is my private life," she answered, fighting to stay calm. "Your private life is part of your public credibility. Headlines suggesting improper boundaries with domestic staff, well, even rumor can damage valuation." Something inside her recoiled. "So now I'm responsible for how paparazzi twist a picture." "That's not what we're saying," the member replied, though his tone disagreed. "We simply urge prudence. Prudence." The word felt like a cage. By evening, Charlotte felt hollowed out. She found the girls in the playroom, but instead of their rosy, carefree chatter, they seemed restless, fussing, snapping at each other, pacing with anxious energy. "Where's Mr. Miles?" Everly asked, pulling at Charlotte's sleeve. "He's still working in another room," Charlotte said gently. "No, he's not," Eva whispered. "He didn't play with us today." Only then did Charlotte notice the silence where Miles' laughter usually resonated. She scanned the hall and found him polishing the stair rail, meticulously, quietly avoiding eye contact. He's pulling back. She could feel the distance as surely as if a physical wall had dropped between them. The girls noticed, too. During bedtime, they tossed and turned, arguing over stuffed animals too wired to settle. Emma crawled out of bed and wandered the hallway, whispering Miles' story. Charlotte's heart fractured. "Sweetheart, Mommy can read tonight." "No," Emma said. "Miles." The rejection wasn't cruel, it was honest. Honest enough to sting. It took nearly an hour to coax them all to sleep. Exhausted, Charlotte stepped out into the hallway just as Miles passed by with a basket of folded towels. His steps faltered. "Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb bedtime." "You didn't." She studied him, hearing the unspoken tension. "You've been distant today." "I thought it was best," he said quietly. For who, she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the basket against his hip and started to walk away. But the universe wasn't done. Charlotte's phone buzzed another email notification. She opened it expecting more PR fallout, but instead, her heart fell to her stomach. The subject line read, "Temporary admission. Hold, hail children." From the prestigious early learning academy she'd fought months to get the girls into. The message was painfully polite. "Given the recent concerns circulating online regarding the home environment, we believe it is in the best interest of all parties to delay admission pending further review." Charlotte stared at the words as if they were written in fire. Her daughters turned away. Because of her life? Because of Miles. The hallway tilted slightly beneath her. The girls' laughter, their healing, their progress, it all suddenly felt breakable again. Behind her, Miles paused, sensing something shift. "Charlotte," he asked. But she couldn't speak. Not yet. The consequences were beginning to roll in like thunder. And nothing, not even the fragile joy that had returned, felt safe anymore. The next morning arrived too quietly. Charlotte stood in the driveway beside her car, smoothing the crease of her blazer as she waited for the director of admissions at the academy. She had barely slept, her mind looping through headlines, meetings, the cold voices questioning her judgment. She told herself the school would listen. They had to. A door opened. Soft footsteps approached. "Ms. Hale." "Thank you for coming." Her tone was gentle but careful, like someone placing fragile glass between them so nothing could accidentally touch. "Thank you for making time," Charlotte replied. "I assume you saw the news." "Yes," the director exhaled. "And I'm sorry for what you're going through. But we have to think about the school environment. We can't expose the children to potential controversy." "Controversy," Charlotte repeated. The word tasted bitter. "You're basing that on manipulated photos and gossip." The woman folded her hands. "Even the suggestion of impropriety can affect enrollment. Parents talk, donors talk, so you're penalizing my children for a rumor. We're not penalizing anyone. We're postponing placement until your home environment is clarified." Charlotte's jaw tightened. Clarified. As if she ran a dangerous household. As if she'd done something shameful. "What if I submit additional documentation, character references, proof of stability?" The director offered a sympathetic smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Hale, the issue isn't paperwork, it's perception. Perception. A shadow with more power than truth." The conversation ended with formal politeness and no real hope. Charlotte walked back toward her car, her pulse pounding. She had built empires. She had taken companies to the brink of collapse and pulled them back. But here she was, powerless because someone photographed a janitor loving her daughters better than the world thought he should. Returning home, she found Miles tightening the hinge of the back door. His shoulders were set movements precise as though he were working inside an invisible box. "Good morning," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "Ms. Hale." 2 words, 2 syllables, sharp as a closing door. He hadn't called her Charlotte since the night of the photographs. "I thought we agreed on first names," she said, keeping her tone measured. "It feels inappropriate," he replied, "given everything happening." She stepped closer. "Miles, you don't have to distance yourself from the girls because of a headline. They need you." He set the screwdriver down. "What they need is stability, and right now I'm the opposite of that." She felt the sting beneath the words, his guilt, his instinct to withdraw his belief that love was dangerous in his hands. Before she could answer, the doorbell chimed. Not once, 3 times. Sharp, official. Miles and Charlotte exchanged a concerned look before she opened the door. A pair of visitors stood on the porch, clipboard badges, professional smiles. "Ms. Hale, we're from CPS Child Protective Services." Charlotte's stomach sank. There must be some mistake. One of the workers shook her head. "We received an anonymous report regarding the safety of your children. We're required to follow up." CPS. She felt the letters crawl up her spine like cold fingers. "May we come in?" the worker asked. Charlotte stepped aside, breath shallow. Miles moved instantly to the background as if trying to make himself invisible. The agents walked through the house, taking notes, examining the playroom, the kitchen, the stairs. Their calm professionalism only heightened the terror in Charlotte's chest. Finally, one asked, "We received a video. It appears to show a man, your employee, pulling the children on a rope in a way that could be unsafe." Charlotte blinked. "You mean the team-building game?" "It was supervised, harmless. The video was cut in a way that suggests rough handling. It was edited," she insisted, "manipulated. We're not making accusations. We just observe." The children peeked from the hallway, confused. Ellie clung to Emma. Eva reached for Miles instinctively but stopped when she saw him tense. "And we've also heard that this employee has been participating in intimate caregiving activities. Baths, bedtime, holding the children," the worker continued. Miles stiffened. "I've never bathed them. I've never done anything inappropriate." Charlotte stepped between them. "I trust him. He's been essential to their emotional recovery." The worker nodded, jotting something down. "We appreciate your input, but our report requires us to note non-relative males with close access." The implication struck like a slap. Her daughters weren't in danger, but the world was ready to believe danger simply because the man who held them was poor. After another round of questions, the agents left, assuring her this was routine, though her heartbeat didn't feel routine at all. As the door closed, little Eva tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, what is CPS? Are they going to take Mr. Miles away?" Her voice trembled. Charlotte's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart, they're just checking things." But inside, doubt began to coil, dangerous, panicked doubt. Behind her, Miles stood silent, shoulders slumped. "This is what I was afraid of," he whispered. She turned. "Miles, none of this is your fault." But he shook his head. "You don't understand. I've lived long enough to know how the world sees men like me. When something looks wrong, they don't ask questions. They assume." His voice softened, wounded. "I won't be the reason you lose anything. Not the girls. Not your reputation. Not your standing." Charles felt her breath catch. The idea of losing him, his steady presence, his laughter, his patience, felt heavier than she expected. "Please don't talk like that," she whispered. But he was already stepping back, already folding into himself. "Charlotte, I think I've stayed too close." The space between them grew like a fog she couldn't break. That night she walked to the guest quarters where Miles slept, meaning to check on him, to reassure him, to ask him to stay, to fight for the fragile family forming between them. But when she opened the door, she froze. On the bed lay an open suitcase, neatly folded shirts, his work boots, a small photograph of Lily tucked into an inside pocket. He looked up startled, caught in the act of leaving. "Charlotte," he breathed, guilt washing over his features. "I was going to tell you." Her heart dropped. "Miles, what are you doing?" He closed the suitcase softly as if afraid noise alone might hurt her. "I'm leaving," he said, "before everything gets worse." For a moment, Charlotte couldn't speak. Her eyes stayed fixed on the suitcase half-zipped folded with precision heartbreak tucked neatly between the seams. The small photograph of Lily slipped into the side pocket made her throat close. She took a slow step into the room. "Miles. Why?" He didn't answer right away. He stared at the suitcase as if it were both a confession and a shield. Finally, he exhaled. "I think you know why." "No," she said softly. "I want to hear you say it." His hand tightened around the handle. "Because the girls deserve safety. And every headline, every rumor, every whisper circles back to me. I won't let myself become the reason they lose anything. Not a school, not an opportunity, not their stability." Charlotte felt the sting before the words fully sank in. "You think you're a danger to them." He shook his head. "Not a danger. A liability." She stepped closer. "Miles, that's not fair to yourself." "It's the truth," he said, voice low. "People look at a man like me and they see a risk. No degree, no pedigree. Just a janitor who somehow ended up too close to the life of a billionaire's children. You didn't end up anywhere," she countered. "The girls chose you." He flinched as if the truth hurt more than lies. "Charlotte, I love those girls." His voice cracked. "But love doesn't erase the world's suspicions. I've been on the wrong side of assumptions before. And when CPS walked in today, I saw the way Everly clung to me. I saw the fear in your face. I can't let them grow attached only to be torn away later." She stepped in front of him, blocking the suitcase. "You're doing this because of fear, not love." "That's where you're wrong," he whispered. "This is exactly what love looks like when you've already survived losing a child. You learn to walk away before the world takes it from you." The room fell silent, heavy with the ghosts neither of them had invited, but both had carried for years. Charlotte drew in a shaky breath. "You think leaving protects them. But it doesn't. It breaks them." "They'll recover," he said quietly. "No." Her voice rose, trembling with something fragile. "They won't. Because you weren't just a playmate or a distraction. You were the first person who made them feel safe after Daniel died." Miles lowered his head. "And I might also be the first person they watch walk away." The honesty sliced her. Charlotte moved closer, so close she could hear his uneven breathing. "You're not just afraid for them. You're afraid for yourself." He didn't deny it. "Since the night Lily died," she continued gently, "you've been punishing yourself, hiding yourself, convincing yourself that loving another child is a betrayal." His jaw clenched. "I don't get to make mistakes, Charlotte. When CPS shows up, people like me don't get second chances." "And what about the girls?" she whispered. "Do they get a second chance at having someone who feels like home?" His breath hitched. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" she pressed. "Because it's true." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, charged, aching. He looked at her finally, eyes red, voice trembling. "Charlotte, the life you have, the world you move in, it's not built for someone like me." She wiped a tear from her cheek before it could fall. "Maybe it's not about worlds anymore." He swallowed hard. "I can't stay." "You can stay," she insisted. "You should stay. Because leaving now, that's not love. That's fear wearing a mask." He stepped back, shaking his head. "If I become the reason the girls lose their place at that school, I don't care about the school," she snapped. He stared at her. The confession startled even her. "I care about them, their hearts, their healing. And you, her voice softened, breaking you, brought them back to life. He blinked, pain flickering across his face. Don't put that weight on me. It's not weight, she said. It's truth. He looked away, jaw tight. Charlotte, you're asking me to stay in a life where I'm already being blamed for things I haven't done, where one wrong angle of a photo can cost you everything. She stepped closer again, slow, steady. You think I care what the world says about a janitor who saved my daughter's joy? I think the world will make you pay for it, he whispered. Let it. That stopped him. Her eyes glistened, voice trembling but steady. Let the world talk. Let them judge. I won't lose you because strangers don't understand what's happening inside this home. He held her gaze for several seconds, something deep and vulnerable pulling behind his eyes. And then he broke. His voice, when it came, sounded like the admission of a man who had run out of armor. Charlotte, if I stay, I don't know if I can keep my distance anymore. Her breath caught. You don't have to. Those words hovered like a truth neither of them were ready to fully shape, but both of them felt its weight. Miles turned away first, gripping the edge of the suitcase as if grounding himself. I need air. He moved past her, leaving the room before she could say more. She followed him down the hallway, her chest tightening. Instead of heading for the garden, he walked through the mudroom, grabbed his jacket, and moved toward the garage entrance. Miles, wait. He paused at the door, but didn't turn around. I need to leave before I change my mind, he murmured. The door closed softly behind him. Charlotte stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the empty space where he'd been. Her pulse hammered. Her breath shook. And then something inside her snapped. She grabbed her keys, marched out of the house, and slid into her car. She didn't know exactly what she would do, only that she would not let this be the end. The engine hummed to life. As she pulled out of the driveway, the narrator's voice, soft, haunting, rose like a promise. That night, Charlotte Hale did something she had never done before. She stepped into the public light not as a CEO, but as a mother, ready to fight for the man who had healed her home. Studio lights buzzed with a soft electric hum, steady low, almost like a heartbeat trying to guide her breathing. Charlotte sat in the green room of a nationally syndicated evening show, palms resting on her knees, fingers trembling with a mixture of resolve and fear. This wasn't her battlefield. Boardrooms, investor meetings, press briefings, those she could command with a voice like polished steel. But the sitting in a television studio about to expose her private life to millions that required a vulnerability she had spent years burying. The producer poked her head in. Ms. Hale, we're ready for you. Her pulse stuttered. She stood, smoothing her jacket, offering a polite nod, but inside her mind whispered the truth. I'm doing this for the girls. And for him. For Miles, who believed he didn't belong in my world. The hallway outside the studio echoed with footsteps, muffled chatter, and the faint rustle of cue cards. As she approached the stage, she heard the host warming up the audience. Tonight, we're speaking with Charlotte Hale, the tech visionary whose recent headlines have sparked national debate. Charlotte closed her eyes. This is it. No more hiding, no more silence. The producer motioned, and go. Charlotte stepped onto the stage, greeted by soft applause and the glow of studio lights. She took her seat opposite the host, a respected journalist known for her empathy and incisive questions. Charlotte, the host, began, her tone calm, inviting. You've had a challenging few weeks. Before we talk about the controversy, how are you? Really? It was the simplest question, but the hardest to answer. Charlotte swallowed. Tired, she admitted, but determined. The host nodded. Let's start with your life since your husband's passing. You've kept things very private. Until now. Charlotte inhaled slowly, hearing echoes of Daniel's laughter in the recesses of her mind. When Daniel died, the girls were only 2. They stopped speaking for almost a year. They withdrew. Emotionally, physically. And She hesitated. I buried myself in work. It felt safer than sitting with grief I didn't know how to parent through. The host nodded gently. And then recently, something changed. Yes, Charlotte said, voice softening. A man entered their lives. Someone unexpected. The host leaned forward. A janitor employed in your home. Audience murmurs rippled just faint enough for microphones to ignore, but loud enough for Charlotte to feel. She didn't flinch this time. Yes, Miles Carter. And the rumors the host pressed. The photos. The accusations online suggesting impropriety. Charlotte lifted her chin. They're wrong. The firmness in her tone silenced the room. She continued carefully, truthfully. Miles isn't a danger. He isn't a scandal. He's a man who lost his own daughter and somehow through that grief found the gentleness to reach mine. He didn't come into my home to replace anyone. But he did bring laughter back to children who had forgotten how to make sound. Her voice wavered, but she didn't hide it. She wanted the world to hear the tremor. We tried everything she said. Therapists, specialists, programs. Nothing reached them. Nothing. Until Miles. The host's expression softened. So, who is he to your family? Charlotte blinked back emotion. He's the person who saw my daughters not as the heirs of a tech empire, not as a tragic headline, but as 4 little girls who needed to be loved without fear. The studio grew quiet, reverent. And what about you? The host asked gently. Who is he to you? Charlotte hesitated, but only for a breath. I'm still learning the answer to that, she said. But I know this: if the world has a problem with the man who gave my daughters their laughter back then, the world has a problem with me. The sentence dropped like a stone into a still lake, quiet, powerful, unforgettable. The host nodded slowly. That's a bold stance. It's the truth, Charlotte said simply. When the interview ended, the studio dimmed. Microphones switched off. Assistants rushed backstage. Charlotte's phone buzzed incessantly, alerts, messages, tags, headlines. CEO defends janitor in emotional interview. The world has a problem with me. Hails viral stand. Millions applaud single mother's courage. Support poured in: single parents, widows, workers, teachers, nurses, people who'd been judged for who they loved or who they trusted. But Charlotte couldn't focus on any of it. She could only think about one man. Across town, in a quiet, outdated bus terminal, Miles sat on a hard plastic bench with his duffel bag at his feet. He'd been staring at the same schedule board for 30 minutes, unable to decide which direction hurt less. The station TV mounted in the corner played muted news loops. Passengers murmured. Footsteps echoed. A vending machine clunked. Then, suddenly, a woman's voice rose from the TV speakers. Someone had turned the volume up. Miles looked up just as Charlotte's interview filled the screen. There she was, under studio lights, speaking his name to the entire country. If the world has a problem with the man who gave my daughters their laughter back. Miles froze. A mother near him gasped softly. Oh my, that's beautiful. Another man nodded. Wish someone defended me like that once. But Miles couldn't hear them anymore. Only her voice, her truth. His throat tightened. She wasn't protecting him. She was honoring him. His pulse hammered in his ears as the interview replayed again. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the tremble in her voice, the courage it took to defend a janitor she had no reason, no obligation to stand beside. Something inside him cracked open. He stood abruptly. The duffel bag thudded against the floor. I can't leave. Not like this. Not after what she risked. Not after what she said. He pressed a hand over his mouth, overwhelmed. What are you going to do? An older woman beside him asked kindly. Miles lifted his bag shoulders, squaring with new resolve. I'm going home. The narrator's voice slipped in soft and electric. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from grief. He was running toward hope. The Hale mansion was unusually warm the next morning, not from temperature but from something gentler, something Charlotte had nearly forgotten how to name hope. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, carrying the distant sound of 4 little girls humming to themselves while stacking blocks in the playroom. It had been a long night after the televised interview messages from colleagues, investors, strangers, all demanding her attention, but the moment she stepped through her front door, none of it mattered. The house felt different, alive, awake, ready. Still, she hadn't expected the doorbell to ring at 8 a.m. Eva's small feet pattered across the hall. "Mommy, someone's here?" Charlotte hurried over, smoothing her hair, bracing herself for reporters or concerned relatives. But when she opened the door, she froze. Miles stood on the front step, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, Lily's pink bedtime clock held gently in his hand. His eyes, tired from a long night and swollen from something deeper, met hers with a tremor of apology. The girls didn't wait. "Mr. Miles, you came back. Don't leave again." Up, up. They launched themselves at him, all 4 at once, arms wrapping around his legs, his torso, his jacket. The sheer force made him stumble back with a startled laugh, soft, wounded, relieved. Charlotte pressed a hand to her chest, feeling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding release in one long exhale. Miles knelt to the girl's height, voice catching. "I missed you too, team." Everly reached up and cupped his cheek with a tiny hand. "You sad." He nodded once, unable to form the words. Eva pointed to the clock he carried. "Lily," she whispered. Charlotte's throat tightened. He swallowed hard. "Yeah, sweetheart. Lily." The girls gathered around it, touching it gently as if honoring someone they had never met but already understood. Charlotte stepped forward, heart shaking. "Miles, you came back." His voice dropped low. "After what you said on national television, how could I not?" She felt the warmth rise behind her eyes, dangerous too. Revealing, but she steadied herself. "Come in." And for the first time he walked through the door not as an employee, but as someone the house had been waiting for. Later that afternoon, after the girls had fallen asleep, curled around stuffed animals, Charlotte led Miles through a wing of the mansion he had never seen. The East Wing. She unlocked the door herself. The hinges creaked the kind of tired, reluctant sound of a space long untouched. Miles frowned. "I didn't know this part of the house was closed off. I haven't opened it since Daniel died." She hesitated, then pushed the door wide. Inside, the room was filled with rolled blueprints, sketches, models, children's furniture, and notes taped to the walls. Dust coated the surfaces, but the intention beneath it all remained vivid, like a dream, paused mid-breath. Miles stepped inside slowly. "What is this?" Charlotte touched the edge of a large blueprint on the table. Her voice softened into something fragile, something sacred. This was Daniel's last passion project. She paused. "And now it's mine." Miles looked more closely. A building layout, bright playrooms, therapy spaces, family suites, a signature scribbled in Daniel's handwriting. Lily and Daniel House, a haven for families in crisis. Miles inhaled sharply. "Lily." "Your daughter's name," she said gently. "When you told me about her, I knew she deserved a place in this home, in this dream." Emotion flickered across his face, disbelief, gratitude, grief, all overlapping like shifting waves. "This center," she continued, "is for parents caring for sick or grieving children. A place where families can stay together during treatment. A place with support resources, warmth, not hospitals, not sterile buildings. A home." Miles ran a hand over the blueprints as if afraid touching them would make them disappear. "Charlotte, this is incredible. It's more than incredible," she said. "It's necessary." He turned toward her, voice unsteady. "Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to help me build it," she said simply. "I want you to be co-director, to lead the programs, to train staff, to guide families the way you guided mine." He blinked, stunned. Me, Charlotte? I'm not qualified for. You're more qualified than anyone, she countered. You know grief. You know healing. You know how to listen, how to love children through silence. You saved my daughters when no one else could. He shook his head, overwhelmed. But what if I fail? What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not enough? She stepped closer, meeting his eyes with steady warmth. If you stumble, the children will see a man who stands back up. If you fear, they'll learn that bravery doesn't mean being unafraid. And if you ever feel you're not enough, I'll remind you that you are. His breath hitched. She added softly, and Daniel would want this. He built this dream for families like yours. Families like ours. Their eyes held two wounded souls slowly stitching into something shared. The girls burst through the doorway, then sleepy-eyed and messy-haired, tugging their blankets behind them. Mommy Ellie yawned. Why you crying? Charlotte smiled through the tears. I'm not crying, sweetheart. Mommy's just happy. Miles knelt as all four girls climbed into his lap, babbling questions about the drawings. Is this a castle? Are there toys? Will kids live here? Lily, live here. Miles swallowed. In a way, yes. Eva tugged Charlotte's sleeve. Mommy, can Mr. Miles stay forever? The question squeezed something tender inside Charlotte. We'll see, she whispered. That evening after dinner, Charlotte sat with a thick stack of documents her attorney had delivered. Not business contracts, not board reports. A legal file marked Supplemental Guardianship Recommendation. She ran her fingers over the folder, feeling its weight. In the doorway, Miles appeared hesitant. You wanted to talk. She held up the document. I do, but not yet. This is bigger than a project, bigger than a job, and I want to explain it when the moment is right. He nodded, slowly, sensing the gravity without understanding it yet. The narrator's voice rose gently, wrapping around the quiet scene. Charlotte Hale had just invited a grieving father into her late husband's dream. But what she was about to ask next would rewrite the future of the Hale family entirely. Charlotte had rehearsed difficult conversations before negotiations board decisions, investor fallouts, but nothing prepared her for the weight of the folder now resting on her lap. Supplemental guardianship. 4 names typed neatly, 4 little lives she would die to protect. And the space beside her name, still blank. She watched the rain sliding down the window, thin lines melting into one another like stories converging. Somewhere downstairs, the girls laughed at something Miles said, their voices echoing up the staircase. Even from a distance, their joy sounded different when he was near, brighter, fuller rooted. This isn't about replacing Daniel, she thought. This is about choosing the family we've become. She called softly, Miles, can you come up for a moment? He arrived a minute later, wiping his hands on a towel. Everything okay? Charlotte swallowed. Yes. Sit with me. He hesitated, sensing the seriousness, then lowered himself onto the edge of the couch. The pink bedtime clock rested on the coffee table between them, soft, ticking, undercutting the silence. What's that? He asked, nodding toward the folder. She turned it toward him. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time, even before the CPS visit, even before everything. He waited. Charlotte opened the document, revealing the legal language inside. This is a supplemental guardianship agreement. It means that if anything ever happened to me, there would be someone designated officially to care for the girls. Not leave it up to the courts. Not leave it to people who think they know what's best. His breath caught. Charlotte, I'm asking you to be that person. Miles went perfectly still, as if the air had thickened. She continued softly. You've been more than a helper or caretaker. You've been a constant. The world may not understand that, but the girls do. I do. He shook his head slowly, voice trembling. No. Charlotte. No. You don't understand the responsibility you're asking for. This is forever. This is what you've already been doing," she whispered. "You show up for them. You protect them. You love them." He shut his eyes at that word. She pressed on. "They trust you in a way I didn't think was possible anymore." "But your in-laws," he began. "Don't get to decide what my daughters need," she finished firmly, "and neither does the board, or investors, or tabloids, or CPS. Her voice steadied with each word. "I do." He stared at the papers, shaking his head in disbelief. "Charlotte, I've made mistakes. I'm not polished. I don't wear the right clothes or know the right people. I've lost more than I've kept." "How can I be the person to step into a role like this?" she breathed in deep and steady. "Because you know how to love through loss. Because you listen. Because you protect without being asked. Because you give the girls the same steadiness you once gave Lily. And because you are the only person I trust to do this." Miles's throat worked. "I don't want to replace their father." "You never could," she said softly. "But you could be another kind of father. One they choose. One who chooses them." Emotion trembled through him. "What if I fail?" "Then you'll apologize, try again. That's what real fathers do." Her lips turned into a small smile. "That's what real families do." He wiped his eyes, quickly embarrassed. "You deserve someone stronger. We deserve someone real," she corrected. "Someone who stays. Someone who loves without being told." Another silence. Not heavy this time. Full. Then footsteps pattered from the hallway. 4 little heads peeked into the room, hair-messy pajamas, mismatched eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What you doing?" Emma asked. "Talking," Charlotte replied gently. Ellie pointed. "Why, Miles sad?" Miles choked on a laugh. "Not sad, just thinking big thoughts." The girls entered, fully climbing onto the couch, onto his lap, onto her lap, forming a little mountain of warmth and trust. Everly tugged the folder. "What's this?" Charlotte touched her daughter's cheek. "It's something about our family." Eva gasped dramatically. "Are we getting a puppy?" Miles laughed through a broken breath. "No, but that would be nice." Charlotte gathered them close. "Girls, if Mommy couldn't be here one day, who would you want to take care of you?" Without hesitation, all 4 answered Miles. Daddy Miles. "Mr. Miles?" Miles's eyes widened as if the world tilted under him. Charlotte whispered, "See." He pressed a hand to his heart, overwhelmed by the love he didn't expect to receive again in this lifetime. Before he could speak, a soft chime filtered from outside voices, footsteps, the hum of people gathering. Charlotte stood. "It's time." Miles wiped his face once more. "Time for what?" "For the opening," she said. Lily and Daniel House. The ceremony drew families, doctors, community leaders. The soundscape was full children running volunteers, greeting the soft murmur of hope settling into brick and mortar. Charlotte took the stage first, her voice layered with meaning. "This project honors 2 children, one I carried, one I never met, but both who taught us that love doesn't disappear when life changes shape." She spoke of Daniel, of his dreams. She spoke of Lily, of the father who carried her memory with tenderness instead of bitterness. Then she looked toward Miles. "And today, one man reminded me that healing doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence." The crowd quieted as she invited him up. Miles stepped forward, heart pounding loud enough he could hear it in his earlobes. He took the microphone hesitantly. "I'm not used to talking in front of people," he said, voice shaking. "I'm more the guy who works behind the scenes. But I know what it's like to lose a child, and I know what it feels like to lose hope. A breath, a swallow. But I also know what it feels like to find it again, in a place you never expected." He looked at the girls, his girls, and then at Charlotte. "That's what Lily and Daniel House is. A place where families don't have to pretend they're okay. a place where love circles back. The audience erupted in soft applause. Not just polite applause, moved applause. Charlotte joined him on stage, fingers brushing his. Not a declaration, not yet, but a promise forming. As they stepped down, the girls grabbed both their hands and tugged them toward the back garden. "Mommy, Daddy, Miles, come see," they squealed. Charlotte felt her breath catch. Daddy Miles. The children had said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Miles turned to her, unsure, emotional, undone. But the girls were already pulling them forward toward a future neither of them had imagined, but both suddenly wanted. The garden behind the Hale mansion had always been quiet, too quiet, like a memory sealed behind glass. But this afternoon it carried the soft, rolling music of life returning. 4 little girls chased each other through rows of flowers Daniel once planted, their laughter weaving through the air like wind bells. Charlotte stood near the wooden bench at the center of the garden, her fingers brushing the carved initials D.H. etched there years ago. The wood was worn smooth by rain and time, but still steady, still holding. She inhaled deeply. No tension, no dread, just the gentle promise of peace. Miles approached from behind her, footsteps soft in the grass. "They're going to trample every one of those tulips." Charlotte smiled. Daniel would have let them. Miles sat beside her, leaving just enough space that their shoulders barely grazed. But even that small touch hummed with something warm and grounding, as if their griefs, once jagged and lonely, had softened into something that could coexist. The girls ran circles around them, giggling. One of them, Eva, paused and leaned her head against Charlotte's hip. "Mommy, look. Daddy Miles, watch us." Miles blinked, startled. "Sweetheart, you don't have to call me," but Emma cut him off with the blunt certainty of a child. "We want to." Ellie nodded. "Because you stay," and Everly added, "Because you love us." Miles looked at the ground, overwhelmed. "I do," he whispered, "more than you know." Charlotte's breath tightened, not with fear, but with a sweetness so tender it almost hurt. She placed a hand over his. "They're only saying out loud what's already true." His fingers curled beneath hers, not pulling away. Later, as the sun lowered into a golden hush, the family gathered on the wooden bench. Miles in the middle, 2 girls piled on each knee, the other 2 leaning against Charlotte. The soft tick of Lily's bedtime clock chimed from the patio table, marking the hour Daniel once called magic time, when children settled, when stories came alive, when love felt closest. Charlotte brushed a strand of hair from Emma's face. "Are you girls ready for story time?" "Yes, Daddy, Miles, pick, no, Mommy, pick, both pick," Miles chuckled. "Sounds like we're co-authors tonight." He reached into the small woven basket of storybooks the girls kept near the bench, but instead of selecting one, he closed the lid gently. "What if he said we tell a story without a book?" The girls gasped. "You can do that." Charlotte laughed softly. "I think he can." Miles took a breath, letting the garden settle into its evening rhythm. Cicadas, murmuring wind brushing leaves, distant bells from a church across the hill. He began, voice rich and low. "Once upon a time, in a house that forgot how to laugh, there lived 4 brave princesses." The girls edged closer, rapt. These princesses could quiet storms with their tiny hands and mend broken hearts without knowing they were doing it. But the house stayed silent because their queen was sad. She missed her king who had flown away too soon. Charlotte's throat tightened. And then Miles continued. "One day a man with a mop came walking into their castle. He wasn't a knight or prince or anyone important. He just wanted to fix a leaky pipe." The girls giggled. But the man had a secret. Miles whispered. His heart was broken too. He'd lost his own little princess named Lily, so he had forgotten how to laugh. Eva leaned into him, whispering, "Like us." Miles kissed the top of her head. "Exactly like you." "And then what happened?" Ellie asked. "Well, Miles said little by little the princesses taught the man how to laugh again. And he taught the princesses that broken hearts don't stay broken forever. They just change shape. Charlotte felt tears rising, not the sharp kind from grief, but the warm kind that came when something finally made sense. And the Queen Everly asked softly. Miles looked at Charlotte then. Not quickly, not shyly. He looked at her as if he were choosing to see her fully for the first time. The Queen, Miles said, gently found out she didn't have to carry sadness alone. She learned that letting someone in wasn't weakness. It was courage. Charlotte didn't hide her tears. She let them fall freely, feeling Daniel's presence threaded through the moment not as sorrow, but as blessing. The girls clapped, declaring it the best story ever told. As the sky deepened into evening, Charlotte and Miles tucked the girls into bed. 4 tiny bodies nestled beneath soft blankets, 4 sets of eyes blinking up with trust. Mommy Emma whispered sleepily, "Are we a whole family now?" Charlotte brushed her thumb across her daughter's cheek. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." Miles hesitated at the doorway until Ellie reached out a hand. "Daddy Miles, kiss goodnight." His breath trembled, but he bent down and kissed her forehead. Then each of the others. Charlotte watched heart full. Lily would have adored them, she thought. And Daniel would have thanked him. After the lights dimmed, Charlotte and Miles stepped into the hallway, walking in quiet companionship toward the garden once more. The night air was cool, scented with the faint sweetness of roses. Miles leaned on the railing, looking up at the stars. "I never thought I'd have something like this again." Charlotte stood beside him. "I never thought I'd heal again." He turned to her, and now she reached for his hand, not as a question, as a certainty. Now she whispered, "I know we're okay." He drew her into a gentle embrace, forehead resting against hers, breath mingling in the quiet. No grand confession, no sudden kiss. Just 2 souls recognizing that love had returned not to erase the past, but to make room for it. Behind them, the tiny pink clock chimed softly, Lily's clock-marking story, time, healing, time, family time. Miles sighed, voice breaking on a whisper. "We're okay now, Lily." And Charlotte, equally soft, added, "We're okay, Daniel. We're okay." The breeze rustled the flowers. The house glowed with warmth. And a new kind of family, fragile, fierce, beautifully imperfect, finally took its first whole breath. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, through a small act of kindness, a steady hand, or the courage to open your heart one more time after the world has broken it. This story reminds us that family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, by presence, by the people who choose to stay when life becomes heavy. It reminds us that grief doesn't mean we stop living. It simply means we learn to love with the cracks still showing. If you've ever known loss, if you've ever found hope in an unexpected place, if someone once stepped into your life and changed everything, please share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it today. And before you go, tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing our storytelling family gather from all around the world. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Your support helps us bring more healing, meaningful stories to life. Thank you truly for spending your time with us. It means more than you know. Until the next story, take care of your heart and take care of each other.